The engine idled, a low, rhythmic vibration beneath them as Michael and Sofia stared up the hill. The colonial house stood isolated, its wide porch catching the fading afternoon light. Sofia lifted a hand, tracing the outline of the roof against the sky. "One day, we will have a house like that," she said. Her voice was steady, but Michael did not answer. He gripped the steering wheel, his knuckles turning white against the leather. On the dashboard, a single sheet of paper lay folded. He glanced down at the bank statement, his eyes locking onto the bottom line. The number was small, static, and final. It mocked the view through the windshield. He looked back at the house, then at the empty road ahead. The distance between the life they lived and the life they wanted felt like a physical chasm. He shifted the car into gear, his movements stiff and deliberate. The promise of the house remained locked behind the glass, unreachable, while the reality of their mounting bills pressed in from every side. They sat in the silence, the weight of their stagnant bank account filling the space between them. The cycles of their days continued, a blur of unpaid utility bills and small, vanishing paychecks. Michael spent those evenings in the corner of their cramped apartment, his focus trapped by the same financial frustration. He reached for a book on a dusty shelf, the spine cracked and worn. He flipped through pages until his eyes landed on a single sentence. "Whatever the mind can conceive and believe, it can achieve." He stopped. He read the words again, pressing his thumb against the paper as if the ink could anchor his drifting resolve. The realization hit him with the force of a physical blow. They had been waiting for the house to transform their lives, expecting the structure to somehow change who they were. He closed the book and looked around the room. The walls felt different now. He understood they had to become the people capable of earning the home before the home could ever exist for them. The shift was immediate. He stood up, pushed the stack of bills aside, and reached for a notebook. The focus of their ambition had finally moved from the external house to their own internal capacity. He waited for Sofia to walk through the door, ready to explain that they were done waiting. Michael laid the notebook on the table and uncapped his pen. Sofia walked in, stopping as she saw the blank page. "How many bedrooms?" Michael asked, his voice steady. Sofia reached for the pen, her hesitation vanishing. "3," she replied. She drew a square on the paper, a kitchen with an island, a garden for herbs. They stopped wishing and started defining. They spent the next hour poring over real estate magazines, cutting out photos of floor plans with sharp, decisive snips. They pinned the images to the wall, creating a collage of their future. It was no longer a vague hope. They pulled out their financial records, laying the statements side by side. They calculated the exact down payment required, writing the final, daunting figure in bold ink at the center of the wall. The numbers were large, but for the first time, they were real. They shifted their focus from, "Can we afford it?" to, "How do we build the capacity to afford it?" The room felt different. The air was charged with a new, singular purpose. They stared at the wall, seeing the blueprints not as drawings, but as a roadmap. The target was set. They were no longer waiting for the house to happen to them. The plan demanded a total overhaul of their existence. Michael enrolled in an evening course, his nights filled with technical manuals and the glare of a desk lamp. He traded rest for mastery, his eyes straining against the small, dense text until the early hours. Meanwhile, Sofia launched her side business, turning their living room into a workspace. She spent every weekend tracking receipts, logging every cent with a sharp, rhythmic precision. They pruned their lives of every non-essential cost. Dining out vanished. Small luxuries were discarded. Every spare dollar was funneled into the house fund, a digital account that grew with agonizing slowness at first. The exhaustion was constant, a heavy weight that settled in their shoulders by midweek. Yet the rhythm became their foundation. They stopped looking at the calendar as a source of stress and started viewing it as a sequence of milestones. They communicated with a new, clipped efficiency, sharing updates on their progress before falling into bed. The silence of the apartment was no longer empty. It was filled with the hum of two people moving in perfect, synchronized effort. They were tired, but for the first time, they were not drifting. They were building. The rhythm broke on a Tuesday. The car shuddered, emitted a sharp, metallic groan, and died in the middle of a busy intersection. Michael sat behind the wheel, the silence inside the cabin deafening. He tried the ignition. The engine gave a pathetic, rhythmic click, then stopped entirely. They had it towed to a shop. Hours later, the mechanic stood before them, holding a printed invoice. The amount was staggering. It was nearly the entirety of what they had managed to set aside for the month. Michael stared at the paper. His vision blurred, the numbers dancing on the page. His breath came in shallow, jagged pulses. He felt the floor of their progress dropping out from under him. He gripped the edge of the counter, his knuckles bruising against the wood. Every sacrifice they had made over the last month seemed to hang in the balance, threatened by a rusted part and a single, catastrophic repair bill. He looked at the total, then at the bank app on his phone. The gap between their dream and their reality had never felt wider. He looked at Sofia, unable to speak, his chest tightening with the crushing weight of impending failure. The dream was not just stalled, it was hemorrhaging. Michael reached for his phone, his thumb hovering over the transfer button that would drain their hard-won house fund. He looked at the invoice again, then at Sofia. "We can use the savings," he whispered, his voice thin. Sofia took the paper from his hand and crumpled it into a ball, tossing it into the bin. "No," she said. "We find another way." The shift in her posture was immediate. They returned home and began the inventory. They pulled boxes from the back of the closet, dragging out electronics, old furniture, and tools they had not touched in years. They posted them online, met buyers in the rain, and handed over their possessions for cold, hard cash. Michael signed up for weekend shifts at the warehouse, his schedule stretching until his eyes burned. Sofia took on extra freelance projects, working through the night while the city slept. Every dollar earned from these desperate trades went directly into the fund, clawing back the ground they had nearly lost. They did not speak of the stress. They spoke only of the math. They were no longer victims of their circumstances. They were architects of their recovery, turning every obstacle into a forced, necessary acceleration of their plan. The final transfer cleared on a Friday morning. They drove to the edge of the county, where the pavement ended and the gravel began. The land sat on a slight rise, overgrown with wild grass that swayed against their ankles. Michael stopped the car and stepped out, the soles of his boots pressing into the dirt. This was the target. He pulled a heavy envelope from his inner pocket, the seal unbroken. Sofia walked to his side, her gaze sweeping across the perimeter. She stopped, her hand finding his. They stood in the center of the open space, the wind pulling at their hair. Michael pulled the document from the envelope. The paper was thick, textured, and cold to the touch. He held it out, and they both gripped the edge. Their names were printed in sharp black ink at the bottom. Across the field, two surveyors in orange vests hammered wooden stakes into the ground, the sound of metal hitting wood echoing across the valley. Every strike marked the boundary of their future. They did not move. They watched the stakes go in, one by one, carving their ownership into the earth. The dream was no longer an image on a wall or a number in a bank account. It had mass. It had soil. It was theirs. The heavy machinery arrived at dawn, carving deep tracks into the soil. Michael and Sofia traded their office pens for gloves and trowels. The foundation poured, a thick gray sea that hardened under the sun into a solid base. Every morning they arrived before the light, dragging lumber and stacking blocks. The work was relentless. Michael felt the weight of every pallet, his muscles burning as he hauled bricks to the masons. Sofia measured and cut, her hands calloused, her focus entirely on the precision of the frame. They moved in a synchronized rhythm, passing materials, mixing mortar, and wiping grit from their faces. As the walls rose, the space shifted from an open field to a series of defined rooms. The smell of sawdust and fresh concrete replaced the scent of wild grass. They did not hire a crew to finish the task. They were the crew. They spent their evenings checking the plumb lines and reinforcing the joints. Each brick set in place was a physical record of the hours they had labored to save. The structure gained height, shielding them from the wind, turning their sweat and their years of discipline into a permanent, tangible legacy that defied the elements. The final pane of glass clicked into the frame with a solid, satisfying thud. Michael tightened the last screw, the metal groaning once before holding fast. Dust motes danced in the air, caught in the late afternoon shafts of light pouring through the windows. The house was sealed. They stepped back, letting the silence settle around them. Gone was the smell of wet cement and sawdust. In its place, the clean scent of wood and dry plaster. They walked from room to room, their footsteps echoing against the floorboards. Every dimension matched the sketches they had pinned to their wall years ago. The kitchen island sat exactly where they had planned, a massive block of wood waiting for use. The sun traveled across the walls, illuminating the corners they had once only imagined in the dark. They stopped in the center of the living area, the light warm on their faces. There were no more tasks to check off, no more materials to haul, and no more shifts to work. The structure stood finished, a perfect physical replica of the target they had set. They stood still, breathing in the quiet, finally occupying the space they had spent years building with their own hands. Sofia moved to the center of the room, her hand trailing along the wall. She turned toward Michael. "The house is beautiful," she said. "But look at us." Michael leaned against the doorframe, his gaze shifting from the sunlit floor to the hands that had built it. They were no longer the people who sat in a car, staring at a distant dream with white-knuckled uncertainty. They had spent years refining their focus, cutting away the non-essential, and moving with a singular, disciplined rhythm. The house was solid, but it was merely the final expression of the work they had performed on themselves. Every sacrifice, every missed meal, and every extra shift had not just bought materials, it had forged their capacity to sustain this life. They realized the true foundation had been poured long before the first shovel hit the dirt. It was built into their habits, their communication, and the persistence that had carried them through every broken plan. The structure provided shelter, but the home was the version of themselves they had become. They stood in the quiet, no longer waiting for life to change them, but standing as the people who had changed their own reality.